Hi, this is Arlene again, coming back to talk about the blast from the grassroots, the social political aspect of the World Cup. And today we have Gowri here to report before we start our discussion on the World Cup in Brazil and also in Qatar. We should report what happened, these past few days.
Yeah, we'll probably start with the scores for the weekends. We have a couple of matches here. From Saturday, we have Mexico versus Cameroon, Chile versus Australia, and of course Spain versus Netherlands.
Mm-hmm.
So Mexico-Cameroon was 1-0, which means Mexico won. And Chile scored 3, beating Australia 3-1. And of course Spain-Netherlands, we don't really have to go there, do we? Well, okay, it was 1-5, so Netherlands actually beat Spain on Saturday.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas yesterday we had another 4 matches. Colombia versus Greece. Colombia won 3-0. England and Italy, where Italy actually won 2-1, so England lost their first match as well. That was another really anticipated game during the weekend. Costa Rica won 3-1 over Uruguay, and finally Ivory Coast won 2-1 over Japan.
Mm-hmm. Very interesting. I hope to know more about the scores, and I think I hope there's a lot of upsets.
Well, I think the England match was pretty upsetting. I didn't actually get the chance to watch it, but I guess from the reaction on my Facebook page and on Twitter, a lot of people were really upset that England lost because they, the English Premier League is one of probably the most watched league in the world, more than the Spanish league.
But the
and the
English
German
has
league.
never been that, on par since 1956. if I'm
Yeah,
not mistaken.
that's for a very long time they've been off game, and still waiting for them to come back. Well, I'm not really an England fan myself, but a lot of people out there feel very strongly about England, and that was quite a bummer that England lost to Italy actually.
Anyway, talking about the football, there's a huge sort of role in terms of the insights of the football matches. Fans and opponents alike were cheering for their own team, and I think one of the greatest beauty of football is it actually unites people rather than divide people.
Mm-hmm. That's right, especially with Brazil, where it is the country for football.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I've been following football since I was a kid, although I didn't watch it intensively every matches, but I have been following since the 90s. I still remember the first football match. The first World Cup that I ever watched is the 1998 one, and I was really impressed. And I thought to myself, one of the beauty of having a World Cup is it's not about commercialization, or it's not. Compared to clubs,
Yeah, that's right.
You are playing it for your own country, so it's more of the spirit of patriotism, nationalism, which is good in a way because it sort of enhances the spirit of oneness, especially when you are rooting for your own country or for certain countries that you felt you have subconscious nationality with.
I guess also the thing about World Cup is everyone watches World Cup, whereas the league games, some people watch it, some people only follow a certain league. Whereas when it comes to the World Cup, everyone is into it. Even people who have never seen football before are suddenly into football, and they're suddenly like, oh, Brazil or England.
And I love the last World Cup. If I'm not mistaken, they have this tagline: "Say no to racism." Like they show it right before every matches, and I thought it's a very good message. You want to promote a society where people are beyond skin color, race, and all that.
By the way, since you brought up 1998, just a little, what do you think of this year's World Cup song?
Oh yeah. I have to admit that I prefer the World Cup song of the past compared to now, and there's something about the spirit of the World Cup song in the past. Maybe because I was a huge fan of Ricky Martin, I guess at the time.
Maybe he does have a reputation for being a ladies' man. But then I think the Cup of Life is actually one of the best World Cup songs ever, because the moment you listen to it, you just get in the mood right away. Whereas the other songs are a bit mellow, not so World Cup like.
And talking about the World Cup, like how they choose countries, usually they would vote. They would vote every year. Every 4 years they will vote for one country that will be representing, for the upcoming World Cup. And of course, this year is in Brazil, and the next 4 years will be in Qatar. And there's this one analysis by the AmericanInterest.com. It stated that, but this research, by the way, it was done before the Brazil's World Cup. It sort of stated that there's a correlation between World Cup and democracy, in a way that it seems like the award of which country should be the host of World Cup, usually it is because the country has strengthened its democracy. So it stated that the relationship between politics and soccer has helped highlight the strengthen the successes of democracy around the world. So awarding of the World Cup to Japan and Korea in 2002 and to South Korea in 2010 shone a light on the progress of democracy in Asia and Africa, notoriously two of the world's least democratic continents. So in the span of one generation, Korea has transformed itself from one of the world's poorest country into one of the most successful economies, and has transitioned from military rule to representative democracy. Similarly, by 2010, South Korea also has transformed itself from an apartheid state into a functional, although problematic, democracy. So the symbolic value of awarding the World Cup tournament was hard to overlook, even if, with the exception of Ghana, the majority of African teams that have historically qualified for the tournaments, like Algeria, Cameroon, Ivory Coast, and Nigeria, hail from authoritarian rather than democratic countries. I mean, this was, a huge paragraph, but I just want to become just to inform like how democracy and World Cup actually go hand in hand. I mean, in the past and until now. But when you move forward to the World Cup in Brazil, it's a bit problematic. I mean, you saw from day to day a lot of news of protests in Brazil.
Yeah, that's right. I think about, according to the news that I have here, 60% of Brazilians are actually not happy about the World Cup being held in Brazil this year. And Brazil, I think you mentioned before that this year's World Cup is the most expensive World Cup ever held at 11.3 billion.
Actually, it's almost 60 billion.
Oh, okay.
From another source that I got.
Because from what I read, the last time in South Africa, they actually spent
4 billion
about 4 billion. Yeah, so Brazil.
There's a huge gap, right, between 4 billion to almost 16 billion.
Yeah, exactly. And so Brazil has so far spent at least 3 or 4 times more than South Africa. And the interesting part is South Africa actually. It's reported that they haven't actually gotten back the money that they invested in the World Cup back then. So the question is, Brazil has spent at least 3 or 4 times more than that, and is it possible for them to actually get back their investments?
It's like ROI, return of investment. But it's impossible, because if you look at the breakdown of the expenditure, majority of the expenditure is on security and on building of infrastructure. So, I mean, of course, you can have the existing infrastructure for, future use. But at the same time, when you think about security, it's a one-off thing, You deploy so many policemen, military personnel to safeguard, the area. But at the same time, it's a lot of money, Can you imagine billions and billions of dollars being spent just for security?
And I think most of these players, the football players also make some crazy demands when they go over to Brazil. I don't really have the news here with me right now because I read it somewhere yesterday where some of them requested for some special kind of soap. Some of them wanted bananas delivered to them every day.
But it won't cost like $1 billion just for those kind of special treatment, isn't it?
I guess, but it all adds up in a way.
But I guess the biggest, problematic about the World Cup in Brazil is the social inequality in Brazil. It seems like the government want to portray its own country to be this progressive Latin American country where instead of trying to solve the structural problem of the poor, it actually shove away and like just push away the poor to the outskirts of Sao Paulo to ensure that, the poor are invisible. But in reality there's a huge gap of social inequality. There's a lot of poor people and there's a lot of rich people as well.
Yeah, and also I think the thing with Brazil is that they use the usual justification that by hosting the World Cup, we're bringing in tourists, we're trying to expand the industry, we're building all this new infrastructure that could come in handy. But we all know that these infrastructures are never going to be touched again. Probably we also have that similar problem in Malaysia when we hosted the Commonwealth Games back in 1997, I think, when we built very big stadiums and all, and now like it's just not being used unless there's some major concert happening. Everything is just left deserted. Same thing happened with the Sochi Olympics and every other country that actually hosted the Olympics. If you look at photographs of the places now, they look so haunted, deserted, everything's rusty, so no one actually goes back to this infrastructure once the thing is over. Yeah,
that's true. And the problem is, like you said just now, does it bring a good ROI, like return in investment? Does the influx of tourists actually generate a boost in the country's economy? And beyond that, does it really benefit the marginalized people, and especially the poor? Like I read from this piece of news where Brazilian police are doing a cleansing of the street where residents of poor communities have been evicted in order to make room for roads, stadiums, and housing for athletes. The military has occupied some of Rio's favelas, increasing their presence and routine patrols. And I saw this one photographer actually took photos of the poor communities around the stadium area, like in Sao Paulo, and it's quite touching in a way, because you see poor communities doing their go by their lives while being surrounded by policemen with guns. I think it's a very dangerous situation, to be in this kind of. I mean, they are being seen as the unwanted or the undesirables.
But then again, you see, there's all these articles about how the government could have spent all this money on the poor. They could have spent it on education. They could have spent it on healthcare. But even if there was no World Cup, to think of it, do you actually think that the government would have spent all that money on the people instead?
Right. I highly doubt.
Exactly.
I highly doubt the government would even spend more than what the people would, deserve to have it. In fact, interestingly, I was very surprised by the amount of people on the streets during the protests. I saw one YouTube video of, people in a very confined area nearby a train station where they did a protest. It's like, ants crawling around. I mean, if you look at a bird's eye view, so many people. And I think
I saw people being attacked with tear gas and being beaten up and all as well.
And in fact, I heard that a lot of them want their team to lose, and they would rather support other teams than their own homegrown Brazilian team. And partly it's not because they are not nationalistic or patriotic. It's just that they feel that they want to show, the ugly side of the World Cup, and to show that the politicians, the government are not really addressing the social inequality, and instead they are spending money on a World Cup that is undeservable to the people.
And also, when they interviewed Neymar, I don't know if you are familiar with Neymar. He's one of the key players in Brazil. when they interviewed him, he said the most important thing is actually to win the World Cup. I guess. He also said that there is a tremendous amount of pressure on Brazil right now because they are the host country and they're probably going to win. And I think he's saying that the moment they get the trophy, like everything else just wouldn't matter anymore.
And in fact, I mean, that's the football player side. Of course, there's a huge pressure for them to win. But on the society side, it seems like the poor communities area that I mentioned have been made way to build stadiums and infrastructure and all that. And in fact, lucrative sponsorship and sponsors and also advertisement has been sort of filled in the area of Sao Paulo in a way. It has become like a commercial event. I mean, we don't have to go. I mean, the FIFA World Cup coming from a very humble background where it's all about the spirit of football, the spirit of one nation instead of the spirit of multiple nation with one spirit of togetherness has replaced this just blunted capitalism and corporatization.
Do you think it could also go down to, especially for Brazil, it could be like an ego thing maybe because they are supposed to be the best country in the world for football and everyone looks up to them when it comes to football and the World Cup especially. So
it is an ego thing. I mean, you don't have to go far. Even in our country, I saw a newspaper cut out. They posted it in the social media. It was back in the 80s, if I'm not mistaken, that Malaysia, 80s or 90s, or 70s, I can't remember, that Malaysia is expected to be in the World Cup by this year, 2014. But we are still not in the World Cup yet.
Right.
So I think it's an ego boost for countries, especially for governments, to show that, hey, we are capable of organizing a world-class event.
Right. I think I also found another article here that says for some, the focus is now wider than Brazil, where no one believes that the World Cup will leave a legacy in Brazil, as FIFA claims, says Felipe Altenfender of Media Ninja. But do you know that what I hope will be the real legacy of Brazilian World Cup? That this will not happen again in other countries. That the idea that FIFA can just arrive and cause like a mass carnage like this with no concern for the ordinary people and leave them with a bill for the billions. He said that we cannot keep letting this happen. But then again, to let a first world country host the World Cup doesn't make sense as well because we do know that the United States or Australia, they're not exactly the prominent teams when it comes to World Cup. So,
well, the US hosted before, I think in 1994, the past World Cup, and it was quite successful. Okay. But I think it depends on the democratic layer of, the democratic foundation of the country. Is, of course, is a pride for any country to host a World Cup, but it's also a way to put priority in place. Like, if you come from a developed country, of course you have the opportunity to host something that is something of this global standard. But if you come from a underdeveloped country, of course your priority is for the people first. That's what I think. But moving on before we end this show is to go to Qatar, where you will be the next FIFA's World Cup in 2018. There's also another very, I would say, sad story because Qatar is not really a poor country. It's one of the wealthiest country in the Middle East. But unfortunately, there's a lot of reports coming out saying that in the midst of building the stadiums and infrastructure for the World Cup, they actually use migrant workers as part of their modern slavery agenda.
I think that's pretty much a given, even if you look like a country like the United Arab Emirates, when when we look at Burj Khalifa, which is like the tallest building in the world now, and it's beautiful.
Oh, sorry, I have to insert. Qatar will be hosting in 2022. It's not 2018. Sorry, continue again.
I forgot what was that. Oh, right, the Burj Khalifa. Well, when everyone goes to Dubai, they see this beautiful building there, and they see this luxurious, glamorous part of the place. But then if you just go to the other side of it, there are so many people living in the slums, and all these people are exploited to actually work on the project to build all these luxurious buildings, whereas they themselves are pretty much homeless and they live in massive poverty.
And in fact, new information came here that Qatar will be spending approximately $200 billion on the World Cup.
Okay, that'll probably be the highest.
That is like multiple times more than the current World Cup. And FIFA's president Sepp Blatter has already admitted that there was definitely direct political influence. Recently, allegation of vote buying and bribery has surfaced up regarding on the World Cup bidding process. And although Qatar strongly denies the allegations. And the Blatter's remarks are helpful to understand that Qatari World Cup is equally important to Europe and economic powerhouses as to Qatar itself. So the economic benefits come with a price, though. One of the most debated topic besides the bribery issue is the migrant workers treatment, like I mentioned earlier. I mean, these are considered modern slavery. They don't have any rights. Their passport will be being seized away from their owner, and what they have to slave their way into the World Cup under the hot sun to build all this infrastructure. In fact, the International Trade Union Confederation (ITUC) warned this month that as many as 4,000 migrant workers might be killed by the time of 2020 tournament kick off.
And I think most of these workers are actually from Nepal and India, and they've already had multiple deaths that occurred amid all these inhuman conditions that they are forced to work on in order to build the stadiums. 4,000
migrant workers that might be killed off. That's crazy. That's totally beyond human rights. When I think about World Cup, I think about human beings, standing together as equals. But this is totally, against the spirit of the World Cup. In fact, it's being argued that workers have to work more than 18 to 19 hours per day with minimal allowances. And in fact, but then they are spending $200 billion on this World Cup. I don't know where the money goes, to be very frank with you.
Well, that's why they're also facing corruption charges now between Qatar and FIFA as well.
So I guess it's it's a development that we should question the FIFA itself. What kind of direction it wants to go, in the future, because it has FIFA and the World Cup is something that is traditionally a very honorable.
Yeah, it's supposed to be just about sportsmanship and people coming together. Like you said, nationalism, you support your country. All these players, because when they play for their league, they're all in separate teams. It doesn't matter which country you're from. But when it comes to the World Cup, you're actually playing, every one of them is playing for the country. It's such a nationalistic thing.
It's about pride, it's about, the idea of honor and being proud of, who you are as a nation. Even I myself, even though I'm not a big fan of football, but I go for World Cup because it makes me feel that, I'm rooting for something more than just capitalism and corporatization. But now seems like the FIFA World Cup is moving towards the direction of, just making money, sponsorship.
And if this keeps going on, it's going to probably have a very negative impact, especially on all the poor community
and disregarding the human rights, Anyway, that's all we have today. We will continue back at 9:10 with
our ABC dialogue.
A discussion, very
visiting our national education blueprint today with Adrian Hare.
Stay tuned.